And I want to tell you about the series that we've been in now the last bunch of weeks. We're actually going to be wrapping it up today. It's called Ambassadors. And this one has really been kind of looking at a unique lens of what it means to be a follower of Jesus, that when we say yes to following Christ, there's a whole bunch of stuff that becomes true of us that wasn't true before. One of the things that becomes true of us is that we become ambassadors for Christ. And that's not something that always is super clear or apparent when we say yes to following Jesus, but it becomes true that God would look at us and say, you are my ambassador. And this is the passage that we've been looking at for the last several weeks. We've been coming back to this in 2 Corinthians chapter 5. It says, we are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. He says, we implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. And here's the whole idea, is that God would look at Jesus and say, I want you to come to the planet to live an innocent life, rise from the dead, right? Die on the cross, rise from the dead, and offer to give new life, that you would stand in between me and people and help peace to be made. And then in a very real way, Jesus would then send us to extend that message, right? To extend that message to the world and to kind of replicate and take that message further as he now is seated at the right hand of God, and he is sending his church to make sure that the rest of the world knows what he did for them. And that's what I would say to you, if you're here today and you're not a follower of Jesus, to know that what God has done for you is this, that first of all, he loves you. He's not mad at you. He's not looking to destroy you. He's not upset that you came today. In fact, he's thrilled that you may be taking a step towards him because he has taken an incredible leap towards you. And he has done that through Jesus, like we just described. That's what Jesus was doing when he came here. He's laying down his life in order to make it possible for you to have peace with God. And that message is the message that we carry as ambassadors for those who follow Jesus. So if you're not a follower of Christ, to know that message is really important to us here at Grace, that you would know that, discover that, and then latch on to that and believe it if you're willing to. For those of us who are followers of Christ, this set of conversations, I think, has been very hopeful and empowering. In fact, if you've missed any of these conversations and you want to catch up online, you can do that through our YouTube channel if you want, or go to the website. You can find it all there. And what I want to do today, though, is I want to wrap up the conversation. I want to make sure we catch the heart of really what it means to be an ambassador, and make sure we kind of catch how God tends to work through his people. So specifically, this is what I want to make sure we catch today, is this, that the power of Christ is often shown through the weakness of his messengers. Right? The power of Christ is often shown through the weakness of his messengers. We're going to unpack that today and try to understand, what does that mean? What does it mean for God to work through the weakness of his messengers? But in a culture that is often a little bit obsessed with image, with presentation, with editing, right, and kind of trying to make ourselves, curating our view and our presentation to the world, God is going to look at us and say, I'm not super concerned about image. I'm actually concerned with reality, the reality of who you are, and I'm going to work through a variety of weaknesses in your life. In fact, my power kind of comes through really strong in the midst of these limitations that you might feel or experience, the things that we might say to ourselves and think that here's all these reasons why God can't use me or won't use me or wouldn't use me or wouldn't want me. Those sets of things that come to our mind may be the very thing that God uses in you to be kind of impactful to others. And in fact, this is kind of how I think of it, is when we think about how God tends to work, I think how we tend to think first is we tend to think of ourselves, and maybe how God might work is we think, well, I'm in the middle of a lot of stuff, right? We tend to have some pain in our lives, and that pain creates a set of weaknesses. God can't really use me. I'm in the middle of all kinds of things going on over here, and once I deal with that and get out of this pain, maybe God could do something with me. Sometimes we think, man, I've got a whole set of problems that I'm in the middle of. And when I solve those problems, I'm not quite there yet, but once I get through the problem phase that I'm in the middle of, once I know what I'm doing with myself, or once we work through our relational issues, or I get out of this addiction, or blah, blah, but once I solve these problems in my life, maybe God could do something with me. Maybe we have some failures, and we look back and say, God's not going to use me. Look at where I've been and what I've done. I basically have disqualified myself from being used by God. Right? And so now maybe I'm still living in the middle of the shame of those failures. And then there's, of course, life is going to bring us a whole set of disappointments because we live in a broken and fallen world where all kinds of stuff happens that is frustrating and disappointing and sometimes even heartbreaking. And there's even things that happens in God's world, in a fallen world, that breaks the heart of God, decisions that we make that break his heart. And we tend to think, man, maybe if I could get kind of like to the other side of this thing, if I could solve these or get through them or work through them, maybe I can get over here. And if I could get over here, then maybe God could actually do some stuff with me. That's where maybe God would use me. And here's the reality. This is not how it works. This is not, so let's do this today. Let's get rid of that picture because that is not going to happen until we're in heaven, right? That's just kind of how it is. Until we go to heaven, we're going to have some stuff like this. In fact, Jesus would say this. He would say, in this life, you will have trouble. You're going to have trouble. He didn't say, in this life, you're going to have no trouble and everything's going to go perfectly. In fact, the big conversation is really around how God shows up in and with and for me in the middle of my trouble, in the middle of all the stuff that I tend to think is a problem or a disqualifier in my life, how he shows up in me in the middle of that and how we kind of cling to him in and through it is the conversation of how God uses us. And here's the crazy part. As we do this, there are, of course, people all along the way that are not yet followers of Jesus. They're not in on this conversation yet, but they're kind of watching this. And they're watching. They have pain, and they have failures, and they have problems, and they have disappointments. And the only difference is really this, is that we're the same, except I have Jesus with me in the middle of it, right? And so when there's pain, I can find some comfort in the middle of that pain. When there's failures, I can find relief and forgiveness for ways that I've failed God. When there's problems, I can find endurance and help to make my way through those, sometimes even wisdom. And in the midst of disappointments, I can find some hope, right? And as we cling to God through all of that, and we do that imperfectly, that actually ends up often being the things that God uses to help somebody maybe that doesn't know Jesus see the hope and the power of God in us. So it's not this picture, it's this one, right? This is the reality of how ambassadors or messengers for Christ tend to be used. Now, I want to tell you guys a story, and we're going to watch a video here in a little bit, but let me tell you kind of the big picture of it. There's a couple in our church, and just in the last handful of months, they went through this incredible story, this really a tragic moment that God used in a very powerful way. So Tony and Danielle, they come here to Akron East, and Tony works on the highways, and he's puts the lines down in the highways, and so he's often in situations where there's lots of traffic, there's some danger. And one day, as he was out working, a car made it over and hit Tony, and it sent him flying 30 feet into a pole. And his life was at risk. I mean, he was in bad shape. And I remember getting the phone call and hearing about it. And he obviously landed on the right side of that equation, and God moved in some powerful ways to heal him and work through where he needs to be. And what I watched, though, as Tony made his way through that journey and is still making his way through that journey, I watched Danielle cling to Jesus in an incredible way through that whole journey. And I watched God use the both of them through a moment of incredible weakness. Incredible weakness. It wasn't I have it all together and I'm not worried at all and God's going to show up. It was desperation. It was desperation. It was in the middle of weakness that Danielle said, would you pray for us? Would you help us? Would you surround us? Would you pray? And God would use this story in an unbelievably powerful way. And I wanted to share it with you guys, one, to celebrate the miracle of God healing him and saving him, and two, to show how these guys have acted as ambassadors in the middle of a very, very weak moment. Right, so let's watch this here together.
So on May 27th, I do road construction, and I was out on a road in North Ridgeville, and I was putting a piece of equipment on a truck. I was standing next to the truck on the eastbound side of the road by the white edge line. And as I was loading the thing on the truck, a vehicle traveling westbound, so the opposite side of the road, drifted like 15 feet and hit me. And when he hit me, it launched me and threw me 32 feet into a pole.
The first miracle we got was that he was alive at the hospital. They had done some scans by the time I got there, and they said there's some signs of internal bleeding. In the morning, I was looking at him, and he was suddenly in more pain, and his vitals started looking really strange on the monitors. And so I hit a button, and they came in, and the next thing I knew, there were probably 30 people in the room with us, and another miracle is when our nurse went to find someone, the head of trauma surgery just overheard him telling someone else, and she came in the room, and she quickly said, Danielle and Tony, she told Tony too, he doesn't remember, but I believe that there is an internal bleed, and I don't know where it is, but I need to go in. I don't believe we have time for scans. We need to go to emergency surgery. And so they took me back and let me pray over him, which I thought was going to be a private moment. So I think God made me an advocate in that moment. I don't want to act like it was like a choice. It was like survival mode to me. But the only thing I knew to cling to was Jesus in the moment. So I prayed over him, and I was praying out loud. And I said amen, and I felt an amen around me, and I turned around, and all the doctors had their heads down. The doctors, nurses, anesthesiologists, they all had their heads down. And they came out and said, hey, we need to huddle. He made it through surgery. There was a bleed. It was really extensive. We had to cut out 10 inches of his bowel. But we stopped the bleed, and we were like, okay, good. And she said, but at the beginning of the surgery, he aspirated on the table. And so they said, we suctioned his lungs. We put him on a ventilator. It's going to be a rough 24 to 48 hours. I said, okay, I understand. She said, we're going to have him recover in ICU. We'll come get you in about 20 minutes. And I said, okay. Well, about an hour passed, and she came back out and said the ventilator wasn't enough. We need to put him on ECMO, which is the highest level of life support you can have. We were just surrounded by just amazing people. So he made it through that surgery, obviously, because he's here. And then, and from there, we started to move, I think, in the right direction. So we ended up spending 3 weeks in the hospital, I think.
One of the first things I remember after being hit, actually the first thing I remember is I remember seeing people, but the first thing I remember that I spoke is Danielle, and she came over, and I said, what happened? And she said, you were hit by a car at work. And I said, how's my coworkers? Are they okay? And she said, all your coworkers are fine. You were the only one that got hit. And I said, if there's a way to let the guy know who hit me, let him know I forgive him. And right off the bat, I felt like God gave me a second chance. And what I need to do is I need to do my best to be an advocate for God and talk about him to people. And you know, when I woke up, I had like 67 text messages. Most of them were people from work who weren't believers or aren't believers. So first thing I would text them back, let them know I was awake, I was doing okay. And I'd always say, God carried me through this and still is carrying me. God has a plan for us. And God, he doesn't make mistakes. He knows what he's doing.
We said multiple times in there, like, if one person in this hospital comes to know Jesus because Tony got hit, then it's all worth it. And there were so many people. Like, people came to see Tony from the other floors, which was just amazing. I think they had seen this, strong man who had gone through this horrible thing, and they were amazed that he was recovering the way that he was.
He's using me in a way to tell my story, to give all the glory to him, and let people know that he gave me a second chance.
I don't know that we'll ever know the extent of the people that were impacted by Tony. And Tony is quick to, anytime somebody says, you're so lucky, he'll always say, I'm not lucky, that was Jesus.
It's powerful. It's powerful. I remember getting the call that day and going up to see Tony and thinking, it's a miracle that he was alive. He was conscious that first day, and he didn't even remember seeing me that day because he would become unconscious from there. And I remember watching Danielle just in desperation, just cling to Jesus, just cling to prayer. And do it. It's exactly what she described. She's like, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to cling to Jesus, right? And this incredible impact that happened through them has been incredible to watch. It's still happening, still playing out. And hear me, guys. I know this story. We praise God that there was a miracle. I know that doesn't always happen, right? There's not always a happy ending at the end of these things. We live in a broken, fallen world, and I have no idea exactly why things play out the way that they do, right, in this fallen world. But what I do know is that God will work, and he will use it, and he will draw people to himself and empower people in and through incredible weakness. And that was true for Danielle and Tony. That's going to be true for us. Believe it or not, Tony's a big guy. I mean, I think he's down 50 pounds in that video. He's a big guy, right? So he was feeling weaker than he's ever felt. Danielle was feeling weaker than she's ever felt emotionally. And God probably used them in some of the most powerful ways that they have ever experienced. There's something that Paul would say in the same letter that we've been in now for a little while in 2 Corinthians. It's a familiar verse. We come back to it a lot because I think it's very important. But here's what he says in 2 Corinthians 12, 9 through 10. He says, but he said to me, he's talking about God, he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses and insults and hardships and persecutions and difficulties, for when I'm weak, then I'm strong. When I'm weak, then I'm strong. The same guy who in the same letter would say, we are ambassadors of Jesus, would say, for when I am weak, then I am strong. Right? And you can see this in the middle of all of this. This is how God works, right? He works very powerfully. Now, does he work through our gifts and some of our strengths? Absolutely, he does that. But he works with great power in our weakness. And not just in the tragic or the kind of the high impact weaknesses, even like Tony and Daniel elsewhere. He works through our everyday weaknesses. He works through the weaknesses that we feel about ourselves. That, man, I thought I would be further in life. Or, man, God could use somebody else who has it together a little bit more. When I figure my life out, when I find my way a little bit, when I don't feel so anxious about all the stuff in my life and all my problems, when maybe I'm a little more put together, God could use me. And he's like, no, I'm going to use you right in the middle of this thing. Right in the middle of this thing. And he uses this picture in the same book here in 2 Corinthians that makes a lot of sense to me. He says this, in 2 Corinthians 4, he says, but we have this treasure, he's talking about the gospel and our relationship with Christ. We have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. This is God's power in me, not my power. He says, we're hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed. He says, we always carry around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body. He says, for we who are alive are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that his life may also be revealed in our mortal body. He says, so that death is at work in us, but life is at work in you. And here's really what he's saying. He's saying that the treasure of the good news of the gospel, that we can be made right with God, the treasure of having a relationship with Jesus, we have all of that in a jar of clay, in this like weak, imperfect thing that's us. Okay, it's in us. It's half done. It's got fragments and cracks, and right, it's a jar of clay. It's in weakness. And he's going to say this amazing, incredible treasure is in a container that's like not quite right, not quite put together, and God uses that. God uses that. And in fact, it's through the imperfections of the jar of clay often that God's treasure shines most brightly. It's in the middle of all of that plays out. And what I love about this is he leans into it and he recognizes his own weaknesses. He says, we're hard-pressed. We're struck down. We're beat down. We're abandoned. And all throughout the book of 2 Corinthians, all throughout the scriptures, he would even say we're despairing even of life. Here's what you don't see. Let me just lean into this for a minute. Here's what you don't see that sometimes shows up in Christian culture. Sometimes in Christian culture, what will happen is because we've come to know Jesus, we start, and because Jesus helps us in the middle of our problems, sometimes we can sound like this and put on a face like this. Well, I want to make sure that the world knows that Jesus helps me in the middle of my problems, so I'm gonna kind of pretend that the pain I'm feeling doesn't hurt because I got Jesus now. Now I'm bulletproof. Nothing hurts anymore. This horrible situation, it's great. I'm gonna smack on like a plastic smile, and I'm gonna pretend like everything's okay and that I don't feel it. Let me just tell you something. That's dumb. Okay, that's dumb. Let me tell you why. First of all, that approach is just simply not honest. It does hurt. It is hard. Life is still a struggle. We do feel disappointments. We are humans. I don't become not susceptible to the realities of a fallen, broken world because I come to know Jesus. Jesus didn't take all my problems away. He shows up with me in the middle of my problems. So it's not that I don't feel or things aren't difficult or that I have to smack on a plastic smile. That's not the idea at all. It's that in the middle of sometimes even my heartbreak, even in the middle of feeling crushed in spirit, of feeling struck down, that there's a God who loves me and who will never forsake me. He's in the middle of that with me. The promise is not to take all of this away from me in this life. The promise is that he will be with me in the midst of all of it. So hear me, when we're talking about being an ambassador, I'm not saying that you should pretend as if you have no problems. You should pretend as if nothing hurts, pretend as if it's all great all the time, and just stuff down the reality of where you actually are. That's not the message. And in fact, if you hang out here long enough, you will know we're pretty real here. In fact, you'll know that our leaders are pretty real here. I don't have it all figured out, and I am not there yet. I'm on a journey. I'm figuring it out. Things still hurt. All of that's real in my life. And if you wonder, Brian, are you still struggling with sin? Yep. I don't see Jesus yet. I haven't left this planet yet. So yeah, I'm still being perfected by Jesus. Literally what the Bible says. So if you're looking for perfect people, good luck, first of all, and go find that somewhere else, because that's not here. Rescued people, yeah. People that Jesus deeply loves and laid his life down for, absolutely. Perfect people, none of them. And I hope none of them that are trying to pretend that they are. I certainly don't want to pretend that. I'm not even close. In fact, I need Jesus more today than when I called out to him the first time. We have treasure in jars of clay, in weakness, sometimes in brokenness. This is where we started. We're going to come back to it. The power of Christ is often shown through the weakness of his messengers. Can you see it more clearly? It's not in having it all together. It's not in having it all buttoned up and pristine and perfect. It's in the middle of sometimes what looks like kind of a mess. That Jesus and his power and his presence shows up. Here's the thing I want to make sure we know. God doesn't wait until the story is finished to reveal his power. It's revealed as it's being written. As it's being written. In the moment, I don't understand what's happening. Before the relief comes. In the struggle, I don't know how we're going to get through this financial situation. I don't know where I'm going to head. I don't know what career to pick. I haven't found the person I'm going to marry. I'm working through the breakup. I'm on my way to learning how to use the Bible. It's in the middle of, the middle is where God shows up powerfully in us, and his power is made known if we let it happen that way. I don't have to pretend and buckle it all up and say, well, maybe God can use me once I get all the way through all of it. Once I'm complete. Once I'm finished, once I have all the answers. It's in the middle of the story, and as it's being revealed, that the power of God shows up. Now, that doesn't mean that every story is ready to be told. It doesn't mean that every struggle is ready to be shared. You have to use discernment. Some things are not appropriate, some things are not ready. If you're in the middle of a situation that you can't entrust to someone else yet, maybe wait until there's some healing that takes place. But to look and say, yeah, I'm still figuring out how to walk with Jesus through anxiety. I'm still trying to figure out how to walk with Jesus through singleness and find joy in the middle of it. He's helping me more and more. I'm trying to figure out how do I walk through the realities of my world with Christ. It's not that all of that goes away the moment I say yes to following Jesus. In fact, we read this. Alec pointed us to it earlier in Psalm 34. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. He is close to the brokenhearted. The dream that I had that didn't happen, the disappointments of I thought it would be different, the challenges of relationships that maybe I'm in the middle of, the financial issues, the sin, maybe even the addiction that has not been figured out yet, it's current. The pain, right? The Lord is close to you in that. Now, it's not once you figure it all out, you can come to me. That's not what Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying, I want you to come to me now. I want you to come to me now. Jesus, you mean once I get my life figured out? No. Jesus, once I get it all? No. Once I solve? Nope. Now. Now. And he actually is the one that helps us to get it cleaned up. Right? He's the one that transforms sometimes over a lifetime. He is close to the brokenhearted. Now, let me just say this, because some of you might be here today and you are truly in the middle of a heartbreak. You are crushed in spirit. You might not be able to hear most of this message, and that's totally fine. What you do need to hear is this. You need to hear that the Lord is with you. He's with you. He sees, he knows every tear. He understands the reality of your pain more than any human being ever could. So if you're in the middle of lonely, desperate pain, you need to understand that there is a God who sees you and knows you and loves you right in the middle of that. Right in the middle of that. He's close to the brokenhearted. He's close to the brokenhearted. He saves those who are crushed in spirit. He saves the one who is desperately crying out to him. And that doesn't mean that every circumstance plays the way that I hope it does. What it does is he sustains and gives hope and provides and shows up, sometimes in ways that I can't even imagine. He shows up in the middle of my weakness, in the middle of my weakness. And even in the middle of my everyday, ordinary weakness. And some of you might be here and you're like, Ryan, I just have I don't have the tragic story, and I don't have the big testimony, and I just have I feel like a normal person. God shows up in the middle of that, in the middle of the insecurities, in the middle of wrestling with comparisons. I wish I had the life that somebody else had. Boy, if I had a marriage like that one, or the weaknesses of those kinds of temptations, he's with you in the middle. He's going to help you move through that in faith that feels weak. I wish my faith was stronger. I still don't know where my life is headed. It's in that kind of weakness that the Lord's going to look at you and say, would you just let me meet you there? Let me meet you there. I know you don't have all the answers. I know you don't have it all figured out. My ambassadors don't know to be an ambassador for Jesus does not mean that we know the future. Does not mean that we have all of the answers. Does not mean that we instantly gain victory over all of our problems. What it does mean is that we have a Jesus we can cling to, and he shows up for us. Today you may be wondering, can I be used by God? Have I disqualified myself? Have I gone too far? Could God use somebody with my set of problems, my disabilities and my addictions and my past? Here, if you get nothing else, man, I just want you to know this. God uses people like you. Like you. Ryan, what do you mean? Like, you're talking to me? I am literally talking to you. Sometimes you folks talk to me afterwards like, Ryan, it feels like you were talking to me. Today I am. Okay? The other times it's the Spirit of God just convicting you. I have no idea what's happening in your life. Today I want you to hear this. God uses people like you. He uses broken people, flawed people, ordinary people, weak people, people that came through addiction, people that made a decision about divorce, people that ended up on the wrong side of a thing, people that got in too much debt, people that needed forgiveness, people with disabilities, people with bad upbringings, people who have been wounded, people who have been abused, people who were forgotten about, or people who were overlooked, people who feel weird. Some of you think, man, I'm weird. Well, at least you know it, right? I'm just saying, right? God uses people like you and like me. What I've found is this: I would love to look at you and say, man, God uses me in my strengths and my giftedness. The reality is that's pretty much not true. It's pretty much not true. God, most of how God has used my life is in my weakness. The fact that I have a story that I had very little to do with, that I grew up without knowing Jesus, that I grew up without a dad in my home, without my biological dad in my house, and that created a massive void in my life. That I didn't believe in marriage, that God made an intentional decision to say, I am choosing to use you. This kid who was forgotten about and left behind and weak and didn't understand his identity, he said, I'm going to choose you for my glory. And I'm going to work powerfully in your life. And man, I'm not even close to complete. And yet he is working, and he has worked in ways that are beyond description. You know who the hero of that story is? It's not me. It's not me. It's the power of God in a weak jar of clay. Can God use you in the middle of your medical issue? In the middle of being up in years, in the middle of being young, in the middle of being new in your faith? God can use you. He uses people like you. And he will use you to reach some people that I could never reach. And that the people that you think, man, if that person could talk to them about Jesus, that'd be awesome. God's like, I want you. I'm going to pick you to talk to them. And I'm going to pick you to make my glory perfected in. This is what it looks like to be an ambassador for Jesus. And the question is this: will you share how God is helping you in your weakness? Not a fake victoriousness that says, I don't feel I'm superhuman now. The reality of I'm still trying to figure it out, and sometimes it's still hard, but man, God is helping me. In honesty, a reality, would you begin to let the power of Jesus show up in you, jar of clay? God's not asking you to be a superhero or to be superhuman. He's not asking you to pretend, thank God. He's not asking you to fake it. He's asking you to, just like Danielle described, to cling to him in the middle of whatever you have going on. And to let some people see some of that. Probably not all of it, but some of it. Some of the real weakness, sometimes pain, neediness. See, we said this week one, his ambassadors are marked by their humility, not their pride, by their weakness, not their strength. Why? So the power of God could be made perfect in us. Would you bow your heads, close your eyes? The band's going to come out. Father, today I want to say thank you that you never leave and you never forsake. When you commit yourself to someone in love, when you say words, Lord, they're able to be trusted and banked on. Your words are trustworthy and true, Lord, and you are the one who has said you'll never leave and you'll never forsake. That you're faithful to forgive us from all of our unrighteousness. You're the one that says that we are accepted in you, included in your family, if we say yes to you, Christ. I pray that you would use each and every person in this room. Lord, would you use them powerfully? I pray that you would embolden them and empower them to tell others about the great work that you're doing in their lives, in spite of their own weakness, sometimes because of their own weakness. Lord, I commission them to be used by you powerfully in the places that you've put them, the neighborhoods, workplaces, and sports teams, families. Lord, not condemning, not pointing out flaws, Lord, but showing and pointing to your power in their own lives. Would you cause, Lord, your power to be perfected in our weakness? Would you give us the courage to let you meet us here even now?